Every single one of us has this voice in our head. We have these voices in our head, just that conflict with each other, which I know you've had that happen to you before as well, where something will happen and one part of your brain is telling you to, you know, respond in a nice and loving way, in an understanding way. And then the other part is telling you to just be petty, to be hateful, to be angry, to be prideful. And this is human. This isn't something that you should be in despair about, that you keep having thoughts like that pop into your mind, but it's the attention that you give those thoughts and how you respond to those accordingly, whether you entertain those ideas or whether you try to flush them out, you know, whether that's in a relationship with your partner, and wanting to be in a prideful state of mind, saying that I didn't do anything wrong. It was you, it was you, it was you. Trying to respond with pettiness, trying to give them what they gave you. If you've done that before, you know that don't end up good, whether it's for the night, for the week, for the entirety of your relationship. Um, just in all circumstances, we have all these thoughts in our head, and it's up to us to control those thoughts. Jesus says, if you look at a woman with lust, you will be committing adultery within your heart. And if you have hate against someone, then you will be committing murder against them in your heart. Now, it's clear that we have to control our thoughts and our mind just so they don't end up like that. I struggle with prideful thoughts every day. I struggle with angry thoughts and just wanting to live in those, because that keeps my flesh content. It makes me not want to, change is scary. And day in and day out, we don't want to change. We want to be content with where we are, because changing is hard, whether it's, even if it's for the good, and we have to remember that change is a process, and change is ultimately for the better when we are trying to chase Christ. And it will be easier once you start to give your heart to Christ, to come towards God, and to have those godly thoughts and start pushing them away. It's scary, which I've kind of felt a few times, is, I started to recognize my old self after I gave my life to Christ. I started to recognize, you know, my old anger, my old hatred, my old pride just enveloping my heart, or starting to, just trying to grab at it again, and that was really scary. That's scary going through that, when you've given your life to God and you've welcomed this new heart. And then after a while, you start to recognize your old self in you right now. You know, that's a really scary thing. Um, you know, God tells us in the Bible that He will not tempt us with anything that we cannot bear. You know, so it's not something that's inevitable of happening. You have full control over that, of how you approach your thoughts. If there's one thing in this life that you have control over, it is your thoughts. We can't control everything physical in this world, but we can control how we approach things mentally. The more, I know you guys have always seen that the angel and the devil on the other shoulder, talking into the person's ear. That's a real thing. That is very real. And you have to pay so close attention to which entity you give your thoughts to, or you give your attention to. After giving my life fully to Christ, there are still instances where I don't want to react with love. I want, I see the two, possible outcomes of the two roads I can come, or I could go down to. One of them is this loving way, you know, this loving, God-centered, heartwarming way, this understanding way. And then the other is something that is just prideful, wants to stand my ground no matter what, and not lose and die on that hill. And there are times that I've found that I don't want to be that loving person. I want to be this person that will die on this hill, just in argument's sake and thought, in my thought processes. There are times where it's like I don't want, I want to give in to this pride. I don't want to be loving right now. you know? And when you start thinking like that, that's when you know that the enemy is start to have a foothold on what you're thinking. Because God would never want that, you know? Jesus got upset a lot in the New Testament, whether it was talking with, hypocrites, religious leaders, whatever the case may be. He got upset and he got angry. It's not unbiblical to get angry at times. It's just what you do with that anger, that is where it comes down to. But he still approached it with love, whether it was loving, rebuking, rebuking in love, or whatever it was always out of love, right? Even when he went into the temple and flipped the tables, it was still out of love, because he saw that they how far they detoured off of what they were supposed to be doing, right? Um, but even then, he did it out of love, because he doesn't want his children to do that, right? And so we always have to think about that, whether even if we're angry, to still approach that loving path and to pray to approach that loving path. Because even if we can't do it, if it's every part of our flesh that does not want to do it, if you ask God to overcome that with his help, he will let you do that. Because his supernatural love is just something that we will never be able to understand. And it's something that overcomes any type of fleshly want and desire in our hearts. We just have to give that to him. It says in the Bible, be angry, but do not sin. Or be angry, but in your anger, do not sin. So when you start to feel negatively or just unpleasant about something, just disgruntled, whatever it may be, just take it to God. Take it to God and ask to see things through his lens, through his point of view, to have his heart in situations, to be enveloped by his love when you approach a situation that your flesh just wants control of, that your flesh wants to fight out against, that it wants to disrupt, and everything of that nature. We have to give it to God. We can't fight sin on our own. That's something that's only approached with God. We are a fallen race, and God is the only one that can bring us back to that state of redemption. When you have things on your heart that just don't sit right, just take it to God. In the heat of the moment, it's so hard to, but if you feel it, just step back. Nothing bad ever happens when you just step back from an argument and things start to get heated. Nothing bad ever happens. You allow yourself to cool down and enter a space of thinking, and you allow your partner or whoever it is to enter that space of thinking. And then you have to bring it to God and say, okay, help me see this through your lens. Help me have your heart in this, Lord. And just whether it's for good or bad in the terms of my worldly path, just let my words align with yours. Right? So that step back is so important and necessary, because in the heat of the moment, your heart is just enveloped by that fleshly want to act out and burst out in anger, right? So enveloped in the most powerful thing you can do in that moment, even if it's not the most loving thing you can do when you get into a heated argument with someone, is step back, right? Because chances are you're not going to be in the mindset to de-escalate immediately. And even if you are, that other person probably isn't going to be, right? So you just have to take a step back and just think and pray to love. Pray to talk with love as the backbone of your vocals, right? Man, if any of you guys are tuning back in, I'm sorry. It's been a minute. It's been a couple months. I've been all over the place, kind of physically, mentally. Some good ways, some bad ways, but I'm back on track. So plan to keep putting stuff out somewhat consistently. And yeah, if you guys got any topics or ideas or anything you'd like me to talk about, try to bring forth a godly point of view into it, let me know in the comments. just whatever. It's all love. Even if I don't have the knowledge or anything to talk about it, I'll try to direct you to someone who does or anything like that. So, as always, God bless.